In the years after Fortnite took over the live service scene, the space became a very attractive option for eager publishers looking to carve out a piece of what was seen as a very lucrative and previously unconquered frontier in modern gaming. There was also Destiny, which did quite well alongside Apex Legends, GTA Online, and Warzone. The notion that every franchise could be an ongoing source of engagement and revenue was an idea that was admittedly too good to pass up. It also could create interesting ways to keep gamers coming back for more. On paper, that concept worked, and things were looking pretty good for live service titles all around. But things have changed. Where single-player games once looked like stories that ended and could not be monetized further, they are now the frontrunners of a new kind of push. Finished products that deliver a certain experience and feel complete in the process. Perhaps that concept should have never been abandoned in the first place. Well, here's what we've got to say on that subject. A dream built on simplicity. As always, we're going to open up our look into live services' merits with the positives first. It's easy to see how the space was a very attractive option for publishers and developers. For starters, it was a way of sustaining revenue after a game's launch, and a way to increase its shelf life and lower dependence on one-time sales. It was also a way to maintain player engagement, allowing a developer to keep its audiences invested in an experience in a way that was previously impossible once they rolled credits on a title. Battle passes, cosmetics, and the like were all ways to keep a game feeling alive, almost as if it was growing alongside the characters we were playing. A live service approach could turn a game into a platform, building a dedicated community of players around it that could withstand the test of time, which was certainly amongst the hardest challenges that any developer tried to beat. In an industry as competitive as modern gaming, the concept of a live service title was certainly valid, and there's no disputing that. But what went wrong? How has modern gaming pivoted back to crafting single-player experiences that could be seen as a one-and-done deal? Well, we'd argue that while the live service model was a brilliant idea for games that could support it, too many eager publishers attempted to implement it in games that could not support it. There was a gap between what could work and the reality of how audiences would respond to games that might have been perceived as inferior thanks to efforts to make them feel like they were better off as a standalone, objectively complete experience. The problem arose when publishers began to believe that every game could be a great addition to the live service genre, a mistake that has now brought things full circle. Concord is probably the best example of this, as we're all quite familiar with how Sony's expensive, premium-looking shooter crashed and burned before it even had a chance to show off what it could do. The damage extended beyond its scope, leading Sony to cancel two other projects that might have even succeeded had Sony not been as pushy as it had been with live service titles. But that is speculation. What remains is the fact that live service hasn't collapsed because players hate multiplayer titles. We've got enough examples of successful ones on that front. But a market like that has the space for only a handful of games that have their players revisiting them regularly enough to keep them profitable in a way that they're intended to be. The live service space became a fight for scraps of time that players simply did not have enough of. Instead, the gaming world has pivoted back to a safer, arguably more engaging approach. Going back to the basics. You don't have to look too far to see the truth in that argument. Sony's recent state of play began and ended with single-player experiences that hold a lot of promise, and have been generating quite a bit of hype. Marvel's Wolverine and Laufey are evidence of a very deliberate showcase language, one that showcases PlayStation's identity as a home for cinematic single-player titles. That's always been evident with titles like Marvel's Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us, the Horizon games, and Uncharted. PlayStation's live service push through studios like Bungie, Firewalk, Haven, and a few others signaled a sort of change in priorities for the brand that did not end well enough. It wasn't that PlayStation isn't going to be a strong live service platform if it manages to get the right title under its umbrella, but it has since realized that it needs to remember what keep people buying its consoles in the first place, and that live service can no longer define the brand. Over at Xbox, things are similar and perhaps a tad more intriguing. The brand's recent strategy has been confusing, with some games aiming to be present across platforms even as others remain exclusive to it. Things get even more muddled when you factor in Game Pass, Xbox on PC, and handhelds, and an entire ecosystem built around letting players get to their games no matter where they may be. However, the recent Xbox Game Showcase threw a spanner in the works, with both Gears of War E-Day and Clockwork Revolution being exclusive to the platform, and both of them aren't timed ones at that. It's proof that while a live service game can and perhaps should exist everywhere thanks to its need for scale, single-player experiences are still the ones that are able to define a platform and effectively communicate its value to its intended audiences. But what has caused this change of heart? A safer way. It's not as if single-player games come without any of the risks that their live service counterparts carry. They're still subject to critical and commercial scrutiny in a world that's becoming increasingly discerning about games considering how expensive they're becoming. But those are risks that are not just clearer, but also the ones that developers and publishers have been dealing with from modern gaming's earliest days. A single-player title could easily win its target audiences over with a strong trailer or by being a part of a known IP. A good review score could mean improved sales for it while it clears launch windows and lets the hype around a desirable title build on its own, and we're looking at GTA 6. The promise of a complete story is one whose value cannot be denied, as are the benefits of a finite marketing campaign. Hell, even a premium price could be seen as a way to increase the perceived value of what a game is bringing to the table. When you compare that to what a live service game needs to do to stay relevant, it's easy to see why gaming's big names are looking to return to releasing single-player games. While a single-player title needs to convince its players to pick up a copy and enjoy it, a live service one needs them to do that and keep coming back for it to turn a profit. The former is like a restaurant that needs you to swing by a few times, but the latter is a place that needs you to move in and consistently engage with what it's offering for it to be valuable across the board. We believe that distinction is best demonstrated by the wave of remakes and remasters that have come our way in recent years. Risk reduction is a major part of it, as such titles are taking players to familiar places to meet familiar faces, while giving them new ways to enjoy a game that was already among their favorites. The safest ways in 2026 aren't merely single-player titles, they're ones that already have names that have garnered a lot of trust back in the day and continue to do so today. The same could be said for all of the horror titles we've seen recently. Such games don't need you spending 500 hours with them. Instead, they need you to enjoy their atmospheres, the tension that they bring, their pacing, and of course, all of the memorable moments you're likely to face when you're dealing with whatever threats that they throw at you. That makes them an almost natural counterpoint to live service titles, and the notion that less content could also be as impactful as an abundance of it immediately comes to mind when you think of games like Onimusha, The Way of the Sword, Silent Hill F, and Resident Evil Requiem. But does that mean the live service genre is entirely dead? Well, not quite. Nearly gone, but not forgotten. There's still a lot to gain from having a successful live service title. For the ones that manage to win, the benefits are certainly enormous. You only have to look at titles like Fortnite, Call of Duty, GTA Online, Minecraft, Roblox, Genshin Impact, and its many imitators, and so many more to see how the genre can and will continue to generate a lot of revenue while keeping players firmly invested in the gameplay loops that they sign up for. But the notion that every publisher has the chops to cook up titles that can manage such a feat is certainly a thing of the past, and rightly so. It's a matter of playing to one's strengths and being aligned with the potential of a concept that's being shaped into a full-fledged experience. The idea of a live service game hasn't died out at the top, but in the middle, where expensive projects launched to the sound of crickets, with the players that were supposed to be in their worlds already busy with other ones that had them more interested. It's a signal that audiences are tired, not of playing multiplayer or online games, but of ones that demand their loyalty on a nearly endless basis. There isn't enough time to hop between titles that need you to engage with them regularly. That's why single-player titles have now come back as a refreshing change of pace that brings a polished, focused, and complete experience to the table. And on that note, we're going to cap this one off by saying that it is a welcome return to what's been a very strong component of modern games. But it's equally important to acknowledge how some games have managed to rise to astronomical success by making their players want to come back to what they're offering. Now, either way, the important part is to have fun, as we always say. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.